I'm Monica. I'm a senior at LSA. I'm studying biochem with a minor in social health and medicine.
I'm Kim. I'm a first-year grad student in the School of Public Health in Nutritional Sciences and Dietetics.
Hey guys, I'm Anjan. I'm a 7th-year MD Ph.D. fellow here at the University of Michigan with a focus in cancer biology for my PhD.
I'm Trevor. I'm a senior in biomedical engineering and I'm applying to med schools right
now. I have a question for Anjan. So, you probably get this question a lot, but what made you choose to do an MD PhD over just an MD or just a PhD? And is there anything that surprised you about the program once you started?
So, in terms of why the dual, I actually initially thought, so just brief background in terms of my undergraduate studies, I did CMB and interdisciplinary physics. So I was a dual major. And when I came into undergrad, thought that I was going to be doing just pure physics and then go on to engineering for graduate school. And then just hit a 180-degree turn once I took one biology class and realized I am completely closing off an entire aspect of career development or potential careers by not exposing myself to this. And so shortly after that, I started working in a lab my sophomore year. And that's what sort of got me exposed to the actual applied side of doing science as opposed to just the theoretical side. And so I knew that research was going to be a part of my career moving forward at that time. But I didn't realize that there was actually this dual degree program that would allow you to do medicine and research, or at least have a focus in both over an extended period of time. And at the time in the laboratory, there was another MD PhD student. His name is Mike Coderdos, and he was the one that sort of pushed me in that direction. Look, you've got this, fairly broad skill set. You might as well just go for both and see what happens. And so that's what I did. And in terms of, so your second question was regarding whether or not something surprised, if there are any surprises.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Was there something you weren't expecting?
I wasn't expecting the level of flexibility that you can actually get specifically at Michigan Medicine. So in terms of the way that tests are structured on a week-to-week basis, you have the entire weekend from Friday to Sunday to take a test. And so if you get it done on Friday, then your entire weekend is free and you can do whatever you want. You can make a trip to Chicago if you wanted to. I've done that. So. And then on the other hand, if you wanted to, fill up your week with fun activities or extracurriculars and student groups, you could do that and then end up testing on Sunday, and that's just fine too. So I'd say it was the flexibility and the attention to mental health actually was what surprised me about medical school.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And I'd say that is a very Michigan-specific sort of quality.
I've heard Michigan med students are the happiest med students.
Let's just say I'm not complaining. So, yeah.
So this is for you two specifically because you're post-undergrad. So I'm currently applying to graduate school. I think this, you kind of were talking about your funding a little bit earlier, but what I'm most nervous for is so far through undergrad, I haven't had to take out any loans, and jumping into grad school, it's it's all going to be me. And how do you what type of funding sources or options are there for grad school and stuff like that, or is taking a gap year a good idea to work and save up, or what's that kind of or is it good to jump in? I don't know.
So if I can take it, I'm always pro taking a gap year because I took 7, so and it was awesome. I didn't save any money while I was doing it because I didn't have jobs I had jobs that were more fun than economic, I guess. And I can talk a little bit about that later if it's of interest. But I just took out loans because I didn't want to work because I worked the whole time in undergrad. And I didn't know what to expect, and I've been out of school for so long that I just decided to take out loans. And then there are things called Grad Plus loans. So if you take out extra loans to pay for like housing and food and normal things that you need to live.
Yeah.
So like if you need to, it's totally there for you, so that you're never gonna like go hungry or like go homeless or something. But there are tons of scholarships. I just didn't bother applying for them this semester just because it was pretty stressful just applying to grad school in general. And I came from a different state and I had to think about moving. That there was just too many things on my plate. But there are things like being a GSI, a grad student instructor, or a GSR, grad student research assistant, something like that. And then your tuition is covered and you get a stipend. So I'm planning on applying for those positions starting next semester. I just wanted to give myself this semester to kind of like figure out what grad school is before doing that, because you have to work 20 hours a week for those positions, and those are pretty limited. I think there's only like a couple per class, and you have to have obviously taken that class and like done well to get those. But those are out there. Not everybody wants to work 20 hours a week. So it kind of just depends on what school you go to, if those are offered, and how many people try to apply for those. But I think taking a year or 2 or 7 off is great, just to get like experience as a person, not in school. I'm assuming everyone, went to kindergarten straight to where you are now, and not having really any time off to like really work. Like, yeah, you have jobs during school and summer and stuff like that, but to actually just be a person that works, is nice to kind of give you a different perspective, especially if it's in the field that you're interested in.
Yeah, I would echo the gap year sort of sentiment. I did take not 7, but one gap year. And during that gap year, I would say, I grew quite a bit during that year just because it gave me the opportunity to get a sense of what it's like having to pay your own bills, feeding yourself, in the sense that like you're making your own money and then you're using your own money for, providing for yourself kind of thing, right? And I never had that sort of an opportunity. Aside from, summertime, sort of like what she was mentioning, to actually have that kind of an experience. And on top of that, I chose a job during the course of that year that sort of helped cement the idea of doing the MD Ph.D. as well, because I was just working in the same laboratory that I worked at during my undergraduate time. And so it helped me publish, it helped me sort of solidify certain aspects of my CV and resume in order to make myself more attractive for graduate school opportunities, in my case, med school. So.
Cool.
If anyone's interested in gap year, I can add a little something.
Yeah, share your experiences. Yeah, what you did.
So I decided to leave the country immediately after I graduated because I studied environmental science and wildlife conservation, and I knew I was going to need to get a master's for the kind of job that I wanted. So I was like, I'm not even going to bother applying for school or jobs in America. I'm going to just have a totally different experience. So I ended up teaching English for a year in South Korea. I went with my sister, which was nice to like move for the first time and have that like support network. And then I realized I never wanted to work inside again, and so I then moved to India and became a yoga instructor, and then moved to Thailand and became a scuba diving instructor, and then did that for 4 years, some amount of time, and I lived in 7, 8 different countries, and just kind of like bebopped around, which was amazing. So I got like, and one thing that I've noticed since I've been back in school, everyone is talking about cultural humility and cultural competency, and I feel like I gained that like tenfold in living in different countries and moving by myself and having to like figure out how to pay for flights and pay for food and find a job and find housing and also like make friends and be part of the community and all these wonderful things that is really hard to do, really beneficial to do, and can help, I think, with any aspect of whatever career you want to go into. But I found it super valuable, and one thing that like really stands out for me is that in all of those places, I was mostly living in developing countries, and though I was working in the tourist industry, I still was exposed to local communities, and every place I went, I noticed there was this really huge gap in food disparities, and what was available for tourists wasn't necessarily available for local communities, and the nutritional value of the foods that were being eaten were really, really poor, and there was lots of adverse health effects from that. So because of all those experiences and kind of slowly noticing nutritional aspects in the countries that I was in, I decided to go into public health and nutrition. I had been working as a scuba instructor because I wanted to get my master's in marine biology, and after spending 5 years working abroad, I realized that was not at all what I wanted to do, and had I not done that, I would have been in the wrong career. And finding that out in grad school, I think probably wouldn't have been the best way to figure that out. So for me, it was super helpful just to kind of realize what I actually wanted to do and not what I thought that I wanted to do.
It's funny, I was actually interested in going to like South Korea or Thailand or something to teach English to kids.
Yeah.
How was your experience?
It was interesting. Especially like being right out of college, I had ideas about how I thought things were going to be, and they definitely were not like that. So it was a really good learning experience in that way. Korea for sure is one of the best countries. Korea and Japan, I'd say, are one of the best Asian countries to go to for teaching English in terms of money. You get paid the most in those two countries, and at least I know for Korea, they pay for your airfare to and from, and they cover insurance and they cover housing, so you just get paid, which is super nice. I originally had wanted to go to Thailand, but they paid half, and they don't cover airfare, and they don't cover health insurance, and they don't cover rent. So just kind of looking through those types of things. For me, Korea was really great as a first country to go to, just because they did provide all of those things for you, which was really nice. And I found my job while I was in America. I just had phone interviews or Skype interviews and things like that, so it was really easy to get everything set up, and they just got everything ready for you, which was a nice way to experience moving to a new country for the first time. But yeah, we can definitely talk about it more. I've had friends that have worked in so many different countries teaching English.
And then how did you like go to be a yoga instructor after that, and like go to scuba diving? Like, how did you find those opportunities?
I just decided that I wanted to do it, so all that money that I saved from living in Korea and not having to pay rent, I spent on those things and all my dive gear, and that was gone. But I just talked to friends and looked on the internet and just like read reviews about things. I didn't always do that, and sometimes I wish that I had, but I learned from my mistakes. I always read reviews about what people say. Contact people if you can call and talk to them, or Skype with them, or email with them, and just ask like specific questions about things that you value and that are important to you, and the experiences that you're looking for, to really like know if that program is going to have what you want, can offer the things that you want to have.
Thanks.
And Anjan, I know you said you also took a gap year. Do you want to elaborate more on your experience?
So, I mean, I was actually going to provide more of like an alternative kind of experience with regards to traveling abroad and other kinds of opportunities that I found available as a result of actually going into graduate school. Shortly after I actually started the graduate portion of my training, and I'd sort of known about this kind of a project or these sorts of projects prior to, just through medical school. But I actually had the flexibility and time during graduate school to sort of embark on global health sort of missions and global health sort of projects. And maybe some of you have already experienced some of those kinds of trips already, because I know there are opportunities in undergraduate, during your undergraduate time, to actually get yourself exposed to things like that. But during my graduate time, or that first year, it's funny, I started working Uber and Lyft in order to raise money to actually like pay for my own trip to Sri Lanka as part of like a larger global health initiative where we were trying to improve access to diabetes care by improving or increasing the number of ancillary care providers that are available within like small communities within Sri Lanka. The specific name of the city is called Trincomalee. And so essentially there are doctor shortages everywhere across the under-resourced settings of the world. And so way to combat that is increasing the number of providers who are not necessarily physicians, but are skilled to some degree to carry out certain tasks that don't necessarily need to be done by a physician, kind of thing. So that's one opportunity to travel and like jobs that I wouldn't have otherwise taken in order to like facilitate that, you know, Uber, Lyft, and like tutoring and things of that nature. Those are the kind of things that I did. And then more recently, about 8-9 months ago, I had the opportunity, purely a social drive actually, to start a company. And so it's a medical technology, health informatics sort of company. And we develop software solutions that facilitate better decision making for physicians, like at the bedside kind of thing. So essentially, 3 of my friends who had graduated from medical school, who I started medical school with, they each texted me within like a 2-week span, and they each asked, "Hey, let's start a company," or they said, "Hey, let's start a company," but they didn't really pitch an idea. Like, you can't really start a company around nothing. And so, like, I sort of took it upon myself at that point. Well, okay, I've got a critical mass of people that want to do this. Let me pitch an idea. Let's see how it goes. They all liked it, and the rest is history. I mean, like, now we're wrapping intellectual property protection around the work we've done. And yeah, it's been rewarding.
So I took my MCAT in March. I sort of started studying in like October and didn't really take it very seriously. And I didn't take a semester off, but I did take 12 credits instead and studied through winter semester and then took it in March. I did take a Kaplan course, and that ran from December to right before my exam. Yeah, it was it was an experience, but Trevor?
Yeah, so I took mine in early May, something like that, or like late May, I think. So I started studying for it during last winter semester. So I studied for it lightly while classes were in. I tried to spend like 5 or so, 5-6 hours a week studying for it, and then once school got out, I spent like the entire next month or whatever it was studying 8 to 10 hours a day, just like banging my head against a wall trying to fit as much information as I could in there. And I didn't take a Kaplan course because I felt like I could stick to the study regimen I set for myself, and it worked out for me. So if you're deciding on whether or not to take the Kaplan course, what I've heard is that if you can't hold yourself to a strict regimen, then it's really good for forcing you to study and be prepared week by week. But if you feel like you have enough internal motivation to keep up with it without the outside help, then by no means do you need it to do well.
Yeah, and that's almost the same reason I took Kaplan. I thought I could do it without Kaplan, and then with school and everything, I just thought it would be easier to have like a stricter schedule set for myself. And then through Kaplan, you have to have books read because they prep you every week for different material, and it just made life so much easier with school because I was still doing 12 credits this semester. I was still taking 4 classes, so the Kaplan regimen helped me study through March.
Yeah, I was sort of like yourself, actually. I didn't use one of the courses. I studied, I think, strictly from Barron's materials. I don't know if that's still in existence, if they still sell products or anything like that. But yeah, those were the books that I used, and there were a bunch of practice tests that you could purchase online, and so those I sort of saved up until like the final 2 weeks of like studying, and went from there really. So, and in some ways, actually, I would say that during the course of my pre-med time as an undergraduate, I sort of treated each course that I was taking as practice for the MCAT, in the sense that the material that I was learning during those courses, I knew I was going to have to use for the MCAT. So study it well up front, and then there's very little time that you have to devote to actually dedicated MCAT studying. So that was sort of the approach that I took.
Yeah, the practice tests are the most important tool I found. I studied from the Kaplan books. So I used the Kaplan books and I used Khan Academy as my 2 primary resources for learning the content. But yeah, saving the practice tests till the last 2 weeks or so before you end up taking it was huge for me, because if you take a practice test earlier, it's not really going to do much for you, because you really need to know your stuff to find out where you are. And I think saving those practice tests for the end and then taking as many as you can is really, really important for knowing how to handle yourself mentally sitting through the 8-hour test, and also just making sure that you have enough content memorized and that you know how to approach the critical thinking questions as best you can.
Yeah, half of that MCAT is, it has nothing to do with content. It has to do with endurance. Just being able to stick through it for the entire duration of the test. So.
And then on that topic, I'm the type of person when I study stuff, I like to do questions. So Kaplan has a question bank for you to use, so you don't have to use up your practice exams. I'm not sure about Princeton Review if they have a question bank, but the Kaplan prep does have question banks to use, and they have like thousands of questions. So.
You guys would be able to answer that better
Yeah,
than I would. It's been
the
a while.
last month before the exam, every weekend for like Saturday, I would take the whole practice exam, and then Sunday morning, I would go through the entire practice exam. And I would do that every week for 4 weeks, and then the last week before the exam, I took a practice exam every third day. And that's how I did it. It was just brute force. I don't even know how many practice exams before I took the actual MCAT. But then it helped because it was a lot easier to take the actual MCAT sitting there because there was less distractions, and I was just able to like go through my questions, and it didn't take as long as I thought it would.
Yeah, don't want to say need, but you probably need to take 3 to 4 full-length practices before the actual one. For me, I didn't think endurance was a big thing on the actual one because the adrenaline was like pumping so hard, and that it's just like I got in there, and then it was like it was done. So I don't think if you've taken the practice test and you know what that feels like to go through a full 8-hour practice where you're not nearly as motivated and focused as you are in the actual one, at least that's how it was for me, then you'll totally be okay with sitting there for the 8 hours when your actual test day is there, and the adrenaline definitely helps get you through.
Yeah, and then the other important part is when you take your practice exams to not take it in a library or something because you get a lot of distractions. You want to mimic testing conditions as much as possible, which is like you sitting in a little box for those many hours and you don't really see people. So sitting by yourself for 8 hours is like the best way to practice because otherwise you still get distracted even if you're not talking to people.
And like you said, you were from out of state, Kim. So like, what made you choose like Michigan, or like what? I know we're not applying to the same program type concentration, but like what other schools kind of what were you like looking at?
So I'm from Boston originally, but I actually moved to California because I wanted to go to Berkeley, and wanted to get in-state tuition. So I did that. Because you only have to be there for a year, very different than Michigan.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
But then once I was applying to schools, I realized I really wanted to do the dietetics program. And Berkeley doesn't offer the dietetics track; they just have public health and nutrition. And there's like 1% chance you can maybe take the classes that you need in order to become a registered dietitian. Okay. But like super slim. And they, I think, were ranked the 9th best public health school in the country, and Michigan's the 4th. And they have the dietetics track. And then when I told them I got into Berkeley, they gave me a nice scholarship. So here I am. It was just the program was the best for what I wanted.
Okay.
The 3 other top-ranking schools above Michigan for public health didn't have nutritional sciences or dietetics.
So you just kind of like looked at what program you're going into, and then the schools had the best program, and then just went for it.
Yeah, so I only applied to schools that were in the top 10 because I thought that was important to me for grad school. If I was going to spend crazy amounts of money to get an education for 2 years, I wanted it to be the top.
Okay.
And Michigan definitely is, especially for public health. I mean, they're the 4th best in the country.
Yeah.
I'm sure I don't know specifically the policy class, but yeah, and also when I also made my decision, the accepted student stay was huge for me. I came here with the intention that I was like, oh, it's gonna be cold and there's gonna be winter and I'm gonna hate it. And then I really liked it, and then I was really bummed because I was like, now I have to actually think about moving to winter away from the ocean, and this sounds like my worst nightmare. But when I came here, everyone was so friendly and so nice, and there's maybe like over a dozen professors in my field, and they all came to accepted student stay. They all gave a presentation about the classes that we're going to have with them, the research that they do, and then we had lunch with them all, and I got to talk to every single professor, which was amazing. When I went to my other accepted student stay, 1 out of the 3 professors came, and I did not connect with my professors and interact with them. And if I wanted to talk to them or meet with them, I wanted to be able to do that. And Michigan really made it known that they cared about us succeeding, and they wanted to make sure that we had the best opportunities so we could have the best career possible and the best education possible, and that like really set in. And some of the other schools, they were like, "You're in grad school. We're not gonna hold your hands. Do it all by yourself." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but so like if you could help like a little bit." So that was really huge for me, actually going to the school and getting the feel for the program, because you can have ideas of what you think it is, and then you're like, "Oh no, this is better," or "Oh no, this is really not at all what I want."
Like it's fairly it's underrated how important it is to like start making contacts in the schools that you are interested in applying to or interested in attending. And I mean, I didn't even take my own advice with regards to Michigan. Like I didn't even meet the guy who runs the MSTP, and then afterwards I find out that he's like one of the most famous people scientifically because he discovered this biomarker that everybody uses to monitor diabetes now. It's just like, wait, what? I should have met this guy prior to. But yeah, it's super, super important, and can't emphasize how important that is. Yeah. It's just that personal connection.
And going off what she was just talking about, how did you choose Michigan, and did you find it difficult since I think you went here undergrad to get into the Michigan?
Yeah, so having done research, and like my mentor, he was sort of, he was one of those folks who was like very, very much well connected within the institution, within like the medical institution, and so like his word travels like crazy. That like, oh, you need to look out for this person, and so like, I mean, there was some strategy involved with that in order to sort of ensure like a spot in some ways. But then in terms of like why Michigan as opposed to other places, I mean, you can't beat how interdisciplinary and how like collegial people are here and how collaborative people are here. So like when it came down to essentially evaluating graduate schools, right? So there's Hopkins where, you know, there's labs that like right next to one another within the same hallway, they are competing. Like literally they are competing. And they do not share resources, they do not share reagents, they do not share information. Here, you will never, it's like very, very hard to find that. And I prefer an environment like that where we pull everyone together up at the same time. It's like this African proverb I really, really like, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm much more in line with that second tenet. So that it was pretty much an easy decision.
So I would say take advantage of the resources here. So I know our career resource center, especially for MMIs, which are multiple mini interviews.
I was just actually proctoring those.
Were you really? Yeah, I have one on Friday. Yeah. So I would say try and, because they do mock ones and they do seminars where they talk about them. I didn't do it, but I wish I had. I think I was okay though. But definitely, because I get all these emails for them, go and try it, because you don't know how you're going to respond to different scenarios. Like I know there was one scenario that I wasn't ready for. I think I handled it well, but it was just way more out there than what I was expecting. And so I think going in and getting the practice, so you know more specifically the types of things that they're going to throw at you, will benefit you greatly when you actually have to do it. Because you might like have a friend and they might ask you questions, but you're not gonna feel the same nerves as if you go into a practice with someone you don't know, and even if it's just like an advising person asking you questions, you're still gonna get that like interview feel from it. And you're gonna find out, hey, do I really need to practice my responses, or am I doing well enough on my own type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the scenario was as follows. Essentially, two applicants walk in, and you have to walk through, like, one of them is instructing the other on how to tie knots, and then the other person has to tie the knot correctly, or try to tie the knot correctly. And whether or not you tie the knot correctly, your evaluation has nothing to do with whether or not you do it correctly. It has more to do with how well you're communicating, whether you're okay with receiving feedback, whether you're dominating conversation versus, you know, like more on the timid side kind of thing. It's like they're looking for a balance, like a well-balanced kind of individual who knows how to give constructive feedback, but is also open to improvement kind of thing. So like that's like those are the kinds of things that MMIs like test, like and adaptability, things like that. Because like in medicine, you have to be a fairly adaptable individual, especially if you want to become a surgeon when things can go south very, very quickly in the OR. And I've experienced this where like there's a massive bleed that's occurring, and the surgeon has to be able to think quickly and then be able to also maneuver quickly. So it's like fairly multifaceted, and these are the sorts of skills that they try to test during those interviews.
I had the exact same scenario, except telling how to tie knots, it was telling someone how to build a Lego structure.
Yeah.
So the exact same thing, yep.
How would you guys compare them to like job interviews?
The MMI format is completely different. Like it was 7 stations, and they were all either like were scenarios like that. There was a role play. There was one traditional job question where it was like, tell me what your most proud moment is, non-academic. So that's like a relatively traditional job interview type question. But if it's an MMI, it's going to be completely different. But a lot of schools, like the other one I applied to was a 15, 20-minute, tell me what your definition of leadership is type of thing, where it was just, there were a lot less medical related questions than I was anticipating. So you do have to be ready for both and have prepared answers for both. And that's why I recommend, doing a mock interview with an advisor or counselor or something like that, because you never know how you're going to respond to those questions because there's just so many, you can't prepare for all of them. So I've always wanted, corny answer, but I've always wanted to be a doctor when I was a kid, and then getting more involved through high school, through undergrad, volunteering in the hospital, shadowing docs, getting involved in research. I found that the research side of it wasn't something I was extremely passionate about, and the more time I spent in a clinical setting, I found out that interacting with patients and people was more my speed and what I wanted to do. And so the whole applying to medical school process has been really fun for me. Getting to research all these schools and find out all these cool opportunities, then actually going and visiting the schools and seeing their facilities and how they treat their students just gets me really excited for the future. And going there and spending time in the hospital just feels right, I guess.
But yeah, so I sort of alluded to how like coming into undergraduate, I was never the kind of person that always wanted to be a doctor, right? And it was just like one course that really started the gears turning. I was far from really having determined that medicine is what I wanted to do at that point, but like having taken that one biology course, it got the gears turning. Then I started doing research, and then I started getting some clinical exposure as well. And what I really decided was, most of my friends actually during my undergraduate time, they were not pursuing medicine. They were in business or in law. And something that I found that was sort of fundamental to all of these sort of disciplines is like the interaction with people. And that's what I liked most about the ability to, one, do research like with other like-minded individuals, and then two, also care for folks who might be impacted by the research that I would be doing in the lab kind of thing, right? And so like money was never really a driving sort of force for me. I could have done it in business or law, just like some of my friends, but that really wasn't it for me. It was more the love of the interaction with people, and so that was what my drive was.
I can share a little. So I'm actually the opposite. I was pre-med when I first started undergrad, and then like I mentioned before, I was like, I don't want to work inside. I want to be outside. I can't imagine working at night, which I just imagine is something that doctors have to do.
Don't actually know, but maybe.
And so I ended up doing environmental science, which is what I thought I always wanted to do. I always wanted to like help in some way. I just wasn't totally sure, and I was like, well, if I don't want to work outside, that means I work. If I don't want to work inside, that means I'm working outside. So I'm going to help do stuff outside. So I was And as I mentioned before, like during my time abroad, I realized that I've always been passionate about nutrition, but I also found out that I liked teaching. I never thought that that was something I wanted to do. I always would say to people, like, I'm not a people person. Like, I don't want to do anything with people. But all of my jobs I had after college were teaching. Like, I taught English, I taught yoga, I taught scuba, and then the last 2 years I was teaching cooking and nutrition classes to low-income communities. I love teaching. So that's kind of how I ended up in public health. And I realized that I do like working with people, and I wanted to. My favorite parts of, I guess, scuba diving was when I would have people that were extremely terrified of the ocean, but wanted to go scuba diving, which was really weird. But like working through their fears with them and getting them to actually go, and then having them let me take them under the water to like 30 feet or whatever it was, and then them coming up afterwards and being like, oh my god, like that was the best thing. Like if you hadn't have like taken the time and the care and the effort to help me overcome my fear, I never would have done this. And then I was like, oh, I like helping people. That's what I want to do. And I still want to be in like the medical field somehow. Like I feel like that's super interesting, and that's something that I'm really passionate about. But in terms of nutrition, so I am now in preventative care in public health, which is why I really wanted to go back to get my master's. When I first moved back to the States, I was like, oh, let me try doing research in a lab, and oddly enough, no one wanted to hire a scuba instructor, which is so strange. But that's how I ended up getting it. I did AmeriCorps for 2 years, and I was able to teach cooking and nutrition classes to low-income communities, and it was absolutely an amazing experience. Lots of ups and downs. I definitely learned a lot about how to talk with people from different backgrounds and different ideas of healthcare and what they expect. That totally set me up for, I think, success in grad school. So that was really nice experience. So that's like another gap year option. So I did mine like way later. Most of my colleagues were 22, 23. But AmeriCorps is a really awesome option if you're thinking about a gap year. If you're trying out a new field or you want to just get experience in that field of interest, there's going to be an AmeriCorps position. And as well, Peace Corps if you wanted to try doing something global. And oddly enough, my roommate is the Peace Corps rep on campus, so if you have any questions, you can set you up with her. But those are two really great options if that's something that you're interested in. If you wanted to try it out, it's a really nice way to do that.
Yeah, and then I'm like Trevor. I always thought I wanted to be a doctor when I was little, and then freshman, like sophomore year, I had like a little freak out. I was like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And I was gonna go into pharmacy, but then I took intro soc, and learning about like health disparities that persist in the United States really got me like rethinking about medicine again. And then I decided to do a social health and medicine minor, and that kind of like solidified my path to going into med school. So I'm not applying right now. I'm taking a gap year as well. And I really wanted to do something with my social minor, but I